Mitchell over Hachimura. Book it. 2-0 lead.
LeBron James is gone. In his place, the Los Angeles Lakers just sent 2 unprotected future first-round picks and 2 additional pick swaps to Utah for 1 center. That number alone should stop you. But underneath it is the real story. Luka Dončić has been quietly asking his front office for exactly this kind of player since the moment he arrived in Los Angeles 16 months ago. And in the span of 2 weeks, the Lakers didn't just finally answer him. They tore apart nearly everything else around him to do it. This isn't a rebuild. This is a bet. And if it's wrong, this roster doesn't have a backup plan. 2 summers ago, this same front office swore it wouldn't mortgage the future for a role player. This July, they did it anyway. And the reason why is the whole story. For 8 seasons, LeBron James was the Lakers. He arrived in the summer of 2018, delivered a championship in the Orlando bubble 2 years later, and became the first player in league history to share an NBA court with his own son. He leaves as the franchise's bridge between 2 very different eras, the last great veteran star of the old Lakers and the launching pad for whatever comes next. Then, in late June of 2026, it ended. Quietly. Sources close to James confirmed he'd informed the team he'd be playing elsewhere next season. No farewell tour. No jersey ceremony. Just a short statement from Lakers Governor Jeannie Buss, calling him a cherished part of the franchise. And here's the strange part. 2 weeks into free agency, LeBron still hasn't signed anywhere. The Warriors, the Cavaliers, and the Heat are all reportedly in the mix, but the most accomplished scorer in NBA history is out there unsigned, and even his own camp doesn't seem to know where he's landing. Here's why the Lakers didn't wait around to find out. This wasn't a team desperate for change because it had collapsed. Los Angeles won the Pacific Division last season. They made the playoffs, they won a round, and then Oklahoma City ended their run in the second. That's respectable. It's also not good enough for a front office sitting on a top 5 talent in his prime. So instead of running it back with the same roster and hoping for better injury luck, Rob Pelinka decided the fastest path forward wasn't patience, it was upheaval. Pelinka has built a reputation for exactly this kind of move. He's the same executive who turned an aging, injury-worn roster into the deal that landed Doncic in the first place. Waiting was never really in his playbook. To really understand why, you have to go back further than this offseason. Back to February of 2025, when the Lakers made the trade that reshaped this entire era, sending out Anthony Davis and bringing in Luka Dončić from Dallas in a deal that stunned the league. At the time, reaction across the NBA was split almost evenly between disbelief and admiration. Teams don't trade a top 5 two-way center for a ball-dominant guard, even an MVP caliber one, without absorbing real risk. It gave Los Angeles a top 3 offensive engine in his prime. It also created an immediate, obvious problem. Davis was the Lakers' defensive anchor and their only real source of rim protection. The moment he left, the Lakers didn't just lose a star, they lost their entire interior identity, and everyone around the league said so at the time. For the next year and a half, the Lakers tried to patch that hole without paying full price for it. They brought in DeAndre Ayton on a buyout after Portland released him, plugging him in as a low-cost starting center. They rotated in Jackson Hayes as insurance behind him. It worked well enough to survive a regular season. The Lakers still finished middle of the pack defensively, propped up more by scheme than by size, but it was never actually solving the problem, it was managing it. Every playoff series, opposing coaches knew exactly where to attack, and Doncic knew it too. Even in his first days in a Lakers uniform, he was already telling the front office what he actually needed, not what was cheap and available. That's the request that would define the next 16 months. One day into free agency this July, the Lakers finally stopped patching and started paying. On July 1st, Los Angeles executed what's called a sign-and-trade, meaning Utah agreed to send Walker Kessler to Los Angeles instead of just letting him walk for nothing in restricted free agency. In exchange, the Jazz received 2 unprotected first-round picks in 2031 and 2033, plus the right to swap first-round picks with the Lakers in 2028 and 2030. Unprotected picks are the riskiest currency in the league. If the Lakers' current core ages badly or breaks down, those selections could land in the lottery, and Utah would simply cash them in. Kessler signed a 4-year, $130 million contract to make it official. In his last fully healthy season, 2024-25, he averaged 11.1 points, 12.2 rebounds, and 2.4 blocks a game, and he was named to the NBA's All-Rookie First Team back in 2022-23. That's not a superstar's resume. That's a rim-protecting specialist's resume. Being paid and traded for, like a foundational piece. To understand why Los Angeles trusted that resume enough to pay this heavily for it, it helps to know where Kessler actually came from. He wasn't a lottery pick handed a starting job. He was the 22nd overall selection in 2022 out of Auburn after transferring there from North Carolina, specifically because he wasn't getting minutes. That transfer alone tells you something about him. A young center willing to sit, learn, and bet on himself somewhere he'd actually get the floor time to develop. At Auburn, he became the most dominant shot blocker in college basketball almost overnight, winning National Defensive Player of the Year honors and helping the Tigers reach the #1 ranking in the country for the first time in program history. That's the version of Kessler the Lakers are betting on returning, not the player who spent most of this past season sidelined after tearing the labrum in his left shoulder and undergoing surgery that ended his year early. The talent has never been the question with Kessler. The health has. So why would a front office give up that much future draft capital for a center who spent most of last season recovering from shoulder surgery? Because this was never really about Walker Kessler's stat line. It was about finally closing the hole that opened up the day Anthony Davis left. 16 months earlier, when Dončić first arrived in that trade, he made exactly one request clear to the front office. Not a wing, not a shooter, a real center. According to ESPN's Dave McMenamin, a source close to the situation put it plainly. Luka's first and foremost desire is an A-list center. That request never changed. All the way through last season and into this offseason, with Dončić spending his summer back home in Slovenia, he reportedly stayed in constant contact with Pelinka and head coach JJ Redick about exactly that. One priority, repeated for 16 months, through two different centers who came and went without ever really answering it. On July 1st, Pelinka finally delivered it. Kessler isn't just a big man. He's a legitimate rim-running, shot-blocking anchor, the kind of front-court partner who turns Doncic's game from dangerous into close to unguardable. That's the partial answer to the price tag. But it's only half the picture, because getting Luka his center meant paying for it somewhere else. To fit Kessler's contract under the salary cap, the Lakers had to give up value across almost every other position on the roster, and the losses weren't just financial, they were structural. Start with the defense. Marcus Smart, one of the league's most respected on-ball defenders and a former Defensive Player of the Year, signed a 2-year, $13 million deal with the Houston Rockets. That's a genuine defensive identity walking out the door, and there's no direct replacement for it on the roster right now. Then the shooting. Luke Kennard, who shot better than 44% from three a season ago, the most efficient volume shooter on the entire team, agreed to join the Phoenix Suns instead, and then the frontcourt got rebuilt almost from scratch. DeAndre Ayton, the Lakers' starting center a year ago, was traded to the Washington Wizards, officially closing the book on the era where Los Angeles kept searching for a bargain bin answer at center instead of paying for a real one. Backup big man Jackson Hayes signed with Utah, the very team that just sent Kessler to LA in the first place, an almost poetic swap of one center for another across the same trade partnership. Maxi Kleber, still technically an unrestricted free agent, is reportedly exploring offers in Europe rather than waiting on a roster spot that may not exist anymore. And even Rui Hachimura, the team's sixth man and a career 12.3 points and 4.3 rebounds per game in a Lakers uniform, is gone, signing a 2-year deal with the crosstown Los Angeles Clippers after the front office made clear there simply wasn't enough cap room left to bring him back. Add it up, and in a matter of weeks, the Lakers lost their best perimeter defender, their most efficient shooter, their incumbent starting center, and their most reliable bench scorer. 4 rotation players who helped this exact team win the Pacific Division, all gone within days of each other, and all of it traceable back to one contract that had to fit. The front office didn't just let that talent walk without trying to patch some of it. Along with Kessler, the Lakers agreed to deals with Sandro Mamukelashvili, a stretch forward coming off a season in Toronto where he shot over 50% from the field. Quentin Grimes, a 3-and-D wing who's shown real perimeter defense at a high level, and Colin Sexton, a scoring guard who can create his own shot off the bench. All 3 signed for a fraction of what Smart, Kennard, and Hachimura commanded combined, which tells you exactly what kind of offseason this was. It wasn't about replacing value one for one. It was about buying just enough serviceable depth to survive an 82-game season, while the actual budget went somewhere else entirely. None of them individually replace Marcus Smart's defensive resume or Luke Kennard's shooting numbers, but together, they're a cheaper, younger attempt to rebuild some of the depth the Lakers just gave away, which is exactly the trade-off you accept when the actual plan is built around 3 specific players, not 15. Because that 3-player plan was already in motion before any of this started. On June 25th, before Kessler, before any of the departures, The Lakers locked up Austin Reeves on a 4-year, $185 million maximum extension, making the former undrafted free agent the highest-paid undrafted player in NBA history. It's worth sitting with how unlikely that sentence actually is. Reeves went completely unselected in the 2021 draft, signed with the Lakers on a 2-way contract out of Oklahoma, and spent his rookie year averaging barely 7 points a game off the bench, buried so far down the depth chart that most national broadcasts didn't even mention his name. Every season since, he's raised his scoring average. Last season, in just 51 games around injuries, he averaged 23.3 points, 5.5 assists, and 4.7 rebounds, a career high across the board, and numbers that put him firmly in the conversation as a fringe all-star. Reeves turned down a smaller option to sign the extension. Pelinka didn't hand out that number out of loyalty. He paid Reeves because, across 51 games, Reeves proved he could function as a legitimate second option next to an MVP-level talent. That extension is the first domino. Everything that came after it makes more sense once you see it that way. To understand how these three are actually supposed to function together, you have to understand what Redick has already built. Since Dončić arrived, Redick has openly modeled the Lakers' offense after the modern league's two most efficient systems, the pace and space warriors of the mid-2010s, and the Celtics team that won it all in 2024. Both of those teams shared one trait that Redick has talked about explicitly. They didn't need a traditional post-up center to function. They needed one who could screen, roll, and finish without slowing anything down. The idea is simple, even if the execution isn't. Multiple players who can create for themselves in isolation, constant ball movement, and enough shooting on the floor that a defense can never fully collapse into the paint. Redick said it himself early in Doncic's tenure, that with Luka, LeBron, and Reeves all able to create for themselves and for others, the offense could reach what he called a different level. LeBron is gone now, but the framework he described didn't disappear with him. It just needs a new third piece, and that's exactly the role Reeves has grown into. What that system was still missing was a center who could actually survive inside it. Someone who wouldn't clog the driving lanes Dončić and Reeves depend on, and who could still protect the rim once the ball got past them. That's the exact gap Ayton and Hayes were never quite able to fill. Both are more traditional, half-court bigs who slow the floor down exactly where Redick needs it to stay open. And it's why Kessler's fit matters more than his box score. Early in his final season with Utah, before the shoulder injury ended his year, Kessler had actually started expanding his own game, taking 1.6 three-point attempts a game and making them at a rate of 75% over a small 5-game sample. Nobody's projecting that number to hold up over a full season. But it's a real signal that Kessler isn't just a traditional back-to-the-basket center. He's already shown a willingness to stretch the floor exactly the way Redick's system rewards. Kessler has talked about it directly, saying Redick, a career three-point shooter himself, has encouraged him to keep developing that shot, because the threat of it alone makes a defense's job significantly harder. Redick has also shown he's willing to bend that system defensively when it matters. Back in January, facing a stretch where Denver's ball movement offense had repeatedly picked the Lakers apart, Redick made an in-game adjustment, putting extra defensive pressure directly on the primary ball handler and living with the rotations behind it. It worked. The Lakers turned a 16-point deficit into a win, and Dončić himself credited the freedom it gave him to focus more on the glass instead of chasing shooters around screens all night. That single game matters here for one reason. It shows Redick isn't locked into one rigid style. He'll adjust the system around whatever pieces he has, which means the real question this season isn't whether Redick has a plan for Dončić, Reeves, and Kessler. It's whether that plan can survive without the year-round safety net LeBron James used to provide. Here's how the three pieces are actually supposed to fit together on paper. Dončić is the engine, a player who controls tempo and manufactures offense out of almost nothing, even when the shot clock is dying. Reeves is now built and paid like a real second option, a guard who can shoot off movement, run pick and roll himself, and carry the offense in the minutes Dončić rests. And Kessler is the piece that makes both of their jobs easier. A vertical lob threat who forces defenses to respect the rim, a shot blocker who can clean up mistakes that used to turn into easy buckets going the other way, and now, potentially, a floor spacer on top of all of it. Three players, three very different skill sets, one shared purpose. It's not a deep roster anymore. It's not even close to the deepest roster in the Western Conference. But it might be the most talented top three the Lakers have had since LeBron and Anthony Davis were both healthy at the same time, which, by the end, was rare. Measure that against the rest of the West, and the gamble starts to make more sense. San Antonio just came off a finals run behind Victor Wembanyama, Oklahoma City is still the team that beat the Lakers themselves in the second round. Denver still has Jokic. Minnesota and Houston are both still built to grind teams down over 7 games rather than 3. None of those rosters are afraid of a deep Lakers bench, and none of them are losing sleep over Sandro Mamukelashvili or Colin Sexton coming off the pine. What actually worries a contender is a team with 3 players who can each independently put up 30 on a given night. In a conference where single possessions decide series and depth on the bench rarely swings a Game 7. That's the version of the Lakers this front office is betting they've now built. Thinner, but sharper at the very top of the roster than almost anyone else out west. None of that guarantees anything, though. This plan has real holes. Kessler didn't just miss games last season. He needed surgery on a torn labrum, and shoulder injuries in basketball have a track record of lingering, especially for a player whose entire value is built on physical, high-contact rim protection. The Lakers are now trusting that same shoulder to hold up across an 82-game season plus a playoff run, with almost no proven insurance behind him if it doesn't. If Kessler goes down again, the drop-off to the next man up on this roster is steep. Perimeter defense is thinner than it's been in years, too. Smart is gone, and there's no clear replacement for his level of on-ball pressure on the roster, which matters enormously against the kind of downhill, shot-creating guards that define nearly every serious Western Conference contender. And when playoff defenses start specifically targeting Dončić and Reeves in the same possessions, sending extra bodies and forcing the ball out of their hands the way a well-coached team is built to do, there's no proven third shot creator on this roster who can consistently punish that. Kessler can finish what's created for him. He hasn't yet shown he can create instant offense on his own, when a defense collapses everything onto the 2 guards. That's the actual test waiting in April. So the Lakers didn't get worse by accident this offseason. They made a deliberate trade, sacrifice the depth, protect 3 specific players, and bet that talent at the top beats size in the middle of the roster. It's the kind of bet that looks brilliant in a championship parade and reckless in a first-round exit, with almost nothing in between. Whether that bet pays off comes down to one question nobody can answer in July. Can 3 players, one of them coming off shoulder surgery, carry a team through a Western Conference bracket built to exploit exactly what this roster is now missing? Everything else, the picks, the contracts, the 4 players who walked out the door, was just the price of finding out.